Up next is Michael Wilson for Global Business Report.
Good morning.
Morning, yeah.
First of all, Wall Street's paused very, very slightly. And so that really is a reflection of what's happened in the Asia-Pacific markets. The Nikkei's extended its slide down about 1%. Shanghai Composite, Shenzhen Component, both down round about 0.1%. Not an enormous amount of movement. But the most important news from that particular region is India's central bank has held its interest rates at 6.3%. That's for the second straight month in a row. But don't forget what investors are now saying, that the ETFs, exchange traded funds, which actually take a sort of sector view of markets, are doing extremely well in China and beating Wall Street as well. China itself, its state-owned banks, its state-owned central banks are cutting deposit rates. Now, I was looking for signs the other day about how the authorities might be more accommodative to growth in China. This could be one of the ways, because it gives the banks more profitability, and it also opens the way for the central bank to be slightly more accommodative as far as interest rates are concerned. Just back to Japan very, very briefly. We've had their GDP figures for for quarter two, 2.7%, slightly higher than expected, but doubts still remain about Japan's ability to recover, and that's basically historically based, because it's had so many years of deflation. As far as the United States is concerned, yes, I did say that stock futures, there's been a relative pause on Wall Street, thus stock futures relatively flat. The rally has sort of fizzled out in a lot of way. The only big corporate news is GameStop getting rid of its CEO. No reason for that actually given. As far as, and they don't think so far, JP Morgan exactly doesn't actually think that the plight of US regional banks will necessarily carry over to Europe. Amazon has been told by investors it has basically too many ideas. It does very well in the United States, but in an open letter from a consultancy called Bernstein, which again is relatively new to me, but apparently a lot of people on Wall Street actually take notice of this. An open letter to the CEO of Amazon, Andy Jassy, saying that it should stick to e-commerce, which it's actually quite good at, and it's also good at cloud computing as well, but stay away from things that it's just thinking about and not actually making profitable. The world's energy system is not fit for purpose. This is according to the World Energy Council. It's saying there's been a sort of lackluster momentum towards green energy solutions towards 2050, and it also forecasts that only half of the world's economies, total economies, will be actually electricity friendly by 2050. I suspect there's a long way to go there. Let me take you to the Bank of Canada, one of the world's leading reserve banks, and certainly a leading central bank as far as the world's concerned, a leading influencer in Canada, pretty obviously. They decided to raise their rates. Now, this is quite peculiar. They've paused for about between 4 and 5 months. Now they've decided to raise, and that really is because we had actually seen this tightening cycle falling a little bit, but the Bank of Canada is resisting that and raising interest rates to 4 3/4%. The UK now, as you know, Sunak is meeting Joe Biden in the United States today, selling the idea of the UK economy. And one thing he's going to tell them, apart from talking trade, is the fact that there will be an AI, an artificial intelligence regulation global conference in London next year. So that's the game that he's actually selling Joe Biden as we speak. In the UK itself, wage growth is becoming a real problem as far as the central bank is concerned. 7.2% is the median increase in wages. Now, that's not quite up to where inflation is, but it certainly will be an inflationary push as more workers seek higher prices to cope with higher higher wages rather to cope with higher prices. The CBI got a vote of sort of confidence on Tuesday about its future, but it still is not being endorsed by the government, nor necessarily is it going to be endorsed by those companies who are still with it when their subscription comes up. This is what they actually worry about right now. So basically what the CBI has had a vote of confidence on its path to getting better after its alleged misfortunes, but it's still got a long way to go. Crypto ownership in the UK has doubled since 2022. There will be regulation from the Financial Conduct Authority. That starts in October. That will regulate ads about crypto. It'll also give people the opportunity to change their minds after a certain amount of time. That regulation comes in October the 8th this year. And finally, a massive change in shopping habits as far as the UK is concerned. Lots more people visiting the supermarket fewer times, but spending more, and certainly going to discount retailers like Aldi and Lidl. The price of sugar and milk has apparently shot up. But basically, it's the cheaper supermarkets who are gaining the benefit of this. Oil, finally, about commodities. Oil, crude prices slightly higher. The International Energy Authority has noted that the summer holiday season in the United States is going to bring a lot of pressure on oil and gasoline stocks there. So that's causing a slight increase. Gold is still looking at about 1950 level. That's the floor under which after that it would start to fall again. But it's basically waiting to see what the Fed's going to do about interest rates next week, as we all are. That's the global view.
So, Michael, good morning. Good to see you again. Truth is, how can we benchmark economic growth that will be able to spur a wage increase that will not be detrimental? Because the conundrum in England is, as we speak, people need wage increase because of the cost of living crisis, but there's no economic growth. So it's a tough tripod to balance things out on.
Yes, it is, and also I think let me put it to you like this. I mean, I'm not a politician, so I don't decide these things. But if it were me, I'd wait. I would hold fast until we've seen inflation actually come down, until that headline, whatever you think it means, whatever I think it means, and you know that we both have our doubts about that, because it all it reflects is a rate of increase. But as soon as that starts to fall, and that signals to the Bank of England it can start reducing interest rates instead of increasing them, then that will be much better as far as wage growth is concerned. But I do not see that happening, and neither do the markets, until at least the end of the year. I think there's another interest rate rise in the offing as far as the UK is concerned, and we'll find about that in 10 days' time. So you're absolutely right. These twin things are making life very, very difficult indeed. It's a question of tightening the wallets and the belt buckle, basically.
All right, so Michael, meeting between UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and US President Joe Biden, and as you've mentioned earlier on, one of the conversations on the table will be on AI regulations. However, there's speculations around how, to what extent the UK would be able to shape global rules outside the EU, especially because, there's some EU-American talks that they've been excluded due to them exiting the EU. So the tech and trade conversations, for instance, part of that. I know the UK is looking to have an AI regulating conference later in the year. Do you think they will still have that strong a voice outside of the EU?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think they will. However, what is relatively strong between the US and the UK, whatever you hear about the special relationship and all the rest of it, all that sort of political stuff, the fact of the matter is that the US and the UK are linked as far as security matters quite tightly. And whilst that might not that might not sound in the headlines as if the UK has got a lot of influence. It most certainly has. It's got a lot of influence in Washington. Yes, of course, trade with the EU and the US is bigger. The US and the EU have their own plans for artificial intelligence. I don't know what Sunak is going to say to Joe Biden to try to convince him otherwise, but we'll learn that in the next couple of days. But you're absolutely right. It's a very, very difficult shout across the Atlantic right now when you're in competition with a big trade bloc like the EU. But I wouldn't dismiss the actual, not the special relationship, all that political stuff, the actual relationship between the UK and the United States as far as security is concerned. And that actually is quite a big selling point.
Well, Michael, it seems to me that the big issue on the table when Prime Minister Sunak meets President Biden today for the first time, his first official trip to Washington, D.C. Fourth time they will be meeting in the last 1 year, will be the Inflation Reduction Act. And all of that conversation about trade protectionism, which even the European Union is complaining about, with the Inflation Reduction Act adopted by the Biden administration. Any hope that anything will shift in that regard, considering the fact that this is not even about Biden himself, this is an act of Congress. But Prime Minister Sunak says, that will be on the table, in addition to other issues, Russian war and all of those associated issues. But I would like you to comment very briefly on the Telegraph newspaper business. The Barclays family, they are saying, there's no problem. Sir Frederick and his nephew, Adrian, they are saying, no, nobody should worry. The company is not going under administration. Who should we believe? The Lloyds Bank Group, or the Bank of Scotland, or Sir Frederick and the Barclays? Because the Telegraph, of course, you know the value of the Telegraph. And then, of course, also the other issue about the PGA Tour and the golf, the LIV Golf, that the Saudi Public Investment Fund is trying to control by putting money into it. There are antitrust issues. How is that likely to play out? Because now we're hearing stories about sponsorship, about endorsements, and how there may be business implications with the PGA and the LIV following the money.
I'll take those in the order that you spoke them. Biden first and Sunak. If I was Sunak, I'd be sitting down and saying, I'm just wondering about these green subsidies that you're actually giving. As far as the World Trade Organizations, don't those rate as government subsidies? That's what I'd be saying. I mean, I'm sure there'll be talk about trade and talk about, but I would just refer back to what I was saying earlier. I feel as though the security independence from the two countries will probably underline that. But I would be I'd be saying to Biden, I feel in a very gentle way, naturally. I don't know, I've not met Sunak, so I don't know how he approaches these kind of things. But I'd be saying, I think that your green subsidies, which are attracting a lot of companies, not only from the UK, but also from the EU, to have a base in the United States, are clearly anti-competitive. And I would have thought that the EU probably has a bit to say about that as well. But we're not hearing that right now. All we're hearing is how the UK is getting on. So that's the kind of thing that I'd be talking about. As far as the PGA is concerned, completely up to them. I mean, you understand what's going. Sovereign wealth funds clearly wants to make a good showing as far as the international circuit is concerned, and for them, the PGA is relatively good publicity. I'll leave it to the sports authorities to decide whether it's anti-competitive or not. And what was your third question? Sorry.
Telegraph, the Telegraph newspaper, Telegraph, and the Spectator that may go under receivership.
I get that. Yeah. Okay. I would take no notice of what any party is saying about the Telegraph. The simple fact of the matter is that traditional newspaper readers, particularly the Telegraph, are getting older. They're getting fewer, and the future of print media, I think, has a long is very doubtful in indeed. Not good doubtful, not bad doubtful, just doubtful. I don't really know which way it's going. That is the sort of thing that I'd be concentrating on. And I think when you have fewer journalists actually trying to do more, which is clearly happening on the Telegraph because they've got an updated online presence as well, which duplicates what the paper does and doesn't add staff to that, then you have to think, is this a business model that you can actually pursue? And don't get me started upon how artificial intelligence will affect those kind of media outlets. But those are the sorts of questions that I'd be putting to interested parties in the Telegraph, including the Barclay brothers and including the banks.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Ayo, what's next?
Thank you very much, Michael.